enforcement to defend and secure our borders. And that's why...
1:08 a.m., November 5th, 2025, the night the United Kingdom caught fire. Belfast city centre is unrecognizable. Flames claw through the skyline, and the air tastes of smoke and betrayal. At least 37 hotels have burned, 114 people are injured, and over 100,000 protesters have taken to the streets in what's already being called the largest civil disturbance since the 2011 London riots. But this isn't London, this is Belfast, a city that has known conflict before, but never quite like this. It began quietly, too quietly. 3 weeks ago, a confidential Home Office report leaked to The Guardian, revealing that the government had signed $2.4 billion worth of new migrant accommodation contracts. On paper, it sounded administrative. In practice, it meant 68 new hotels across the UK, many in Northern Ireland, were to be converted into government-run housing for asylum seekers. Local councils were never consulted. Residents woke up to find military trucks unloading supplies outside their town's only hotel. No statement, no vote, just silence wrapped in bureaucracy. By the time Westminster confirmed the contracts, anger had already metastasized. Across social media, one phrase began trending: homes for strangers, not for us. This funneled to private contractors. One stood out: Merit Holdings Limited, a shell company tied to a former advisor to the Prime Minister himself. The revelation struck like lightning. Overnight, talk radio stations from Belfast to Birmingham were consumed by a single question: who profits from compassion? At 7:42 p.m. November 5th, that question became a riot. Police footage later confirmed the first bottle was thrown outside the High Street Hotel, Belfast. It was meant to house 230 asylum seekers under a $7.8 million annual contract. But by nightfall, it was a bonfire. Firefighters were blocked from entry by crowds chanting, "Where is Westminster?" The chant spread faster than the flames. Derry, Lisburn, Ballymena. Within 3 hours, at least 19 fires were reported across Northern Ireland. The BBC described it as contained unrest. Sky News called it Britain's reckoning. Social feeds called it something else entirely. #BritainOnFire. By 9 p.m., that hashtag had hit 40 million impressions. Videos of police lines clashing with civilians flooded TikTok, some captioned with lyrics from an old protest song, "This is not our home anymore." In one viral clip, a nurse named Sophie Mallister holds her phone to the chaos and says, voice trembling, "My rent went up 41% this year." They tell me there's no funding left, but there's funding for this. 6 hours later, her video had been seen by 3.2 million people. Inside Westminster, panic had a different face. Cabinet sources say the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, was already awake, locked in the Situation Room with senior Home Office officials. An encrypted memo leaked from that meeting within hours. Northern Command overstretched. Reserve units requested. Political approval pending. The approval never came. At 10:27 p.m., riot police lost control of the Parliament Square barricades. Tear gas was deployed for the first time since 2013. On Sky, anchors struggled to fill airtime between casualty updates. 27 police officers hospitalized. 37 hotels burned. £68 million in property losses. A government advisor told ITV News, "We underestimated how quickly frustration could organize itself." Another simply said, "This is collapse, not protest." Behind those numbers were real people. Thomas Reed, 78, a retired veteran from Lisburn, was filmed walking past the ashes of what used to be the King's Crown Hotel. Draped in the Union Jack, he stopped to speak to a reporter. "I fought for this country," he said quietly, "but I don't recognize it anymore." That line became the quote of the night, replayed on every channel, every feed, every phone. By dawn, even those who had never cared about politics were watching. The country was no longer asking who started the fire, but why no one stopped it. At 6:00 a.m., the Prime Minister addressed the nation. Cameras flashed as he unfolded a single sheet of paper titled National Stability Address. His words were calm, deliberate, and empty. "My government condemns the violence in Northern Ireland and reaffirms our commitment to unity." No mention of the contracts, no mention of the leaked memo, no mention of how 100,000 people could flood the streets overnight. Just the familiar rhythm of political anesthesia. When reporters shouted questions, "Will you suspend the asylum hotel program? Will you visit Belfast?" he turned away. The broadcast ended in silence. But the silence outside was gone. By midday, the Northern Ireland Police Service confirmed that more than 140 people were injured, 53 arrests, £91 million in damage. Hospitals were running on backup generators after fuel depots were blockaded. Civilian drones captured long lines of ambulances stuck behind burning debris. Economists warned that if the violence reached the ports, trade to Liverpool and Glasgow could freeze within 48 hours. The government's response? A press release with 3 sentences. Public safety remains our priority. Dialogue must continue. Violence will not be tolerated. But dialogue ended when the first hotel fell. At 1:45 p.m., an emergency briefing in Downing Street turned into open argument. The Home Secretary called for military deployment. Treasury officials warned it would tank the markets. One insider later told The Times, it wasn't a meeting, it was a funeral. By afternoon, the crisis had gone global. Reuters ran the headline, Britain burns as migrant policy backfires. In Brussels, an EU diplomat remarked off record, Britain used to export stability, now it exports chaos. Washington urged restraint on all sides. Dublin demanded immediate communication from London. But communication had broken down long before. In Belfast, energy grids flickered. Power lines were sabotaged. 2 cellular towers were set ablaze in Coleraine, cutting signals for 60,000 homes. My 5 briefings leaked to the press revealed 52 encrypted channels coordinating protest movements in real time. Authorities had tried to infiltrate them, but the server shifted every 90 minutes. Containment impossible, one report read. Public mood volatile. At 5:32 p.m., an image went viral. A police officer kneeling in front of a crowd, holding a burned Union Jack. The caption read, "We serve the people, not the politicians." Within an hour, it became the defining symbol of the crisis. Inside Parliament, MPs scrambled to draft emergency resolutions. The opposition leader demanded the immediate resignation of the Home Secretary, calling her criminally negligent. Leaked footage showed aides shouting in corridors, accusing each other of leaking memos to the press. The BBC's political editor described the mood as panic behind protocol. Meanwhile, markets trembled. The pound fell 4% overnight. Consumer confidence dropped 8%. £1.2 billion vanished from retail stocks in a single trading session. Travel agencies reported a 46% surge in flight bookings from Belfast to Dublin. People are literally fleeing for a weekend of calm, one airline executive said. That's not tourism, that's evacuation. Yet through all the chaos, ordinary people were doing what governments could not. Cleaning, helping, rebuilding. In Belfast city centre, residents gathered to sweep glass and ash from the streets. Someone hung a cardboard sign on the door of a burned-out hotel. Home once, hope again. It was shared 500,000 times before morning. By evening, even the Prime Minister's allies began to fracture. Cabinet leaks revealed internal warnings ignored weeks earlier. Intelligence briefings from MI5 that flagged mounting anger and credible threats of organized unrest. When asked why nothing was done, a senior advisor reportedly told The Guardian, because it was politically inconvenient. That quote spread faster than the government's press releases. By nightfall, the crisis had a name, the Belfast Blaze. Social media was flooded with black and white photos of charred hotels under the hashtag Britain on Fire. Commentators called it the moment Britain saw its reflection. And maybe they were right. At 10:12 p.m., Prime Minister Starmer returned to Downing Street. Sources say he looked pale, eyes fixed on the live feed from Belfast, streets lit by fire and rain. One aide asked if he wanted to draft a follow-up statement. He reportedly replied, "What would I even say?" At midnight, a coalition of local leaders in Northern Ireland announced a temporary cease to protests, urging calm. Their message was clear. This is our home, not Westminster's battleground. But across the UK, smaller demonstrations had already begun, in Liverpool, Glasgow, and Manchester. What started as a Northern Ireland crisis was now a national reckoning. By 2 a.m., online forums were buzzing with conspiracy theories, claims that opposition activists had infiltrated protest groups, that the fires were staged to justify crackdowns, that foreign influence was behind the coordination. None confirmed, all viral. The truth, as always, sat somewhere in the smoke. At 6 a.m., rain returned to Belfast. The flames dimmed, leaving blackened shells of hotels and burnt tarmac. Civilians walked through the ruins, carrying buckets, brooms, and silence. In a small church near Donegal Square, volunteers lit candles for the injured, Catholic, Protestant, migrant, and local. Each flame, small, stubborn, equal. In that fragile calm, a teacher named Aileen wrote 4 words on a wall of soot. Forgiveness builds what fury burns. Within hours, her message became the most shared post in the country. Even government ministers retweeted it. Because beneath the fury, people still remembered what mattered. This wasn't just about contracts or hotels. It was about exhaustion. A generation promised stability and given slogans instead. A nation told to tighten its belt, while billions went missing in offshore accounts. A government that preached compassion but built it out of profit margins. By noon on November 6th, Belfast had begun sweeping up the ashes, but Westminster still hadn't found its footing. Opposition MPs filed a motion of no confidence against the Home Secretary. Rumors swirled that senior Labour backbenchers were preparing letters to the 1922 committee. Unthinkable weeks ago, now inevitable. Foreign press dubbed it the Starmer collapse. In the United States, CNN ran a headline that read, "Britain's leadership crisis deepens as Belfast burns." French papers simply called it "La Chaos Britannique." Even Russian state media joined the chorus, mocking Britain as a nation devoured by its own hypocrisy. But amid the noise, one truth lingered. This wasn't about foreign influence. It was about trust, lost, traded, and betrayed. At 11:58 p.m., a final image emerged from Belfast. A group of strangers, locals and migrants alike, lifting a fallen street sign back into place. No speeches, no cameras, just hands rebuilding what words had destroyed. And maybe that's where Britain finds itself now, somewhere between fury and forgiveness. The statistics will change, injuries will be updated, costs recalculated, but the question won't fade. What happens when a nation stops believing its own leaders? Is this just a riot, or is it a reckoning? The answer won't come from Parliament or press conferences. It will come from the streets, the voices, the people still sweeping the ash away. If you're watching this right now, hit like so this story breaks the algorithm, because silence wins when truth stops traveling. Subscribe to Westminster Pulse and turn on the bell, because Britain has just opened its next chapter, and what comes after might rewrite everything. This is not the end. This is only the smoke before the storm, and when the firelight fades, what remains will decide who we really are.